Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on another episode of the Leadership for the Now. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful friend, Scarlett Roa. Hi, Scarlett. Welcome to the
Hi,
show.
Florin. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's actually really a pleasure to be here and to be able to share my thoughts on diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability.
Wonderful. I so much look forward to this discussion because we had a previous discussion and I know how much wisdom you can share with us. But before we start that, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. I'm 40. I was born in Chile in 88. I came to Sweden when I was 7 as a refugee. And I always mention this because I think it's a very important part of my life. I took a lot with me during the refugee time in Sweden, and I learned a lot during this time, even though I was very, very young. I have a very broad study background. I'm a lawyer. I studied a master in international law and a bachelor in labor law. And then I also have a master in strategic communication, a bunch of other studies in intercultural communication and so on. I have a son who is 20. I live in Stockholm with my husband, and I work a lot and train a lot now. Also, we were talking about health and how important it is to take care of yourself. So I train a lot, dance a lot, have fun. That's me.
Oh, wow. So tell us a little bit about your so first of all, you came to Sweden when you were very, very young, right?
I
And
was
so
7, almost 8. Yeah.
right. So you feel a little bit with the Ukrainians and what they're going through right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's devastating to see. We didn't have the same. We didn't have a war in Chile. It was a military dictator, so it's quite different. And I was born into that, so I didn't experience freedom before I moved to Sweden. So I
Mm.
don't. I can relate about being a refugee, but I think it's horrible to be able to horrible to live in those conditions right now and what is
Wow.
happening in Ukraine. So I hope it gets some kind of stabilization, it gets stabilized, and that we will be able to stop the war soon.
Yeah. We all hope that. So how that you coming to Sweden when you were 7 or 8 years old, how has that shaped your kind of your career? Because I know you made some career choices because of that. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yes, actually, I'm an independent consultant in sustainability, and I've worked for the last 16 years in the field of sustainability, but also business development, digitalization. And I think that my past as a refugee has always been a very big influence in my not only study choice but also career choice. I studied labor law because in Chile during the dictator we didn't have human rights, and the unions
Mm.
were really fighting for their labor law, and so it was really difficult to live there, and I recall how difficult it was for my parents to find jobs and so on. So I think that my study choice led me to the career path that I've had in sustainability. I started to work when I was 25, directly after my first university degree. I
Mhm.
started to work at a human rights center. It's called Center for Justice in Värmland.
Oh, nice.
And I started to work with discrimination cases. Um, but that time it's important, Florin, to understand that everybody is talking about sustainability nowadays.
Yeah.
It's the trend word. But when I work with that in 2016, and I work with equity and diversity, and educated a lot of people and a lot of employers, organizations, we didn't talk about social sustainability. It
Mhm.
wasn't common to mention sustainability. And so we talk a lot about diversity, human rights, but not sustainability. And it's also now it's of course it's a part of social sustainability. So I think that my path as a refugee, and to be able to maybe feel and have the empathy that it's necessary to understand what others are going through. It's very important when you work with sustainability, and I think that led me to this career choice.
Wow. So I very much resonate with that because although I'm a white male in Sweden, and you might believe that, well, Florin, you probably have not experienced, being excluded or being bullied, and to some extent I have, but it always takes someone from the outside like yourself to come in and to kind of just teach us and talk about those things that some of us have not experienced. So you definitely have on one side your professional experience, on the other side your personal experience. But I'm curious about how it comes that you put these two things together, sustainability and diversity and inclusion, right? Because for me, and maybe for many people, these are very different, right? So touch on that a little bit.
I don't think that it's different. It's actually a part of it. When I'm not going to get I'm not going to lecture about sustainability today. I often do that, but I actually wrote my latest thesis on the subject, actually on the subject of corporate social responsibility, diversity, equality, equity, and sustainability, and the difference in the concepts and the terminology. But diversity, equity, and inclusion, as is the subject today, is actually a part of social sustainability nowadays. Before, it formed part of corporate social responsibility, and it has been a part of that for as long as we have worked. During the industrial time in the 1800s or 1700s in the whole world, you already talked about the responsibilities of employers or companies or business leaders to take care of their employees so they will be more productive.
Sure.
So even then you started to talk about labor legislation, about diversity, about equity, about how to be inclusive, even though we didn't use the same terminology as we do now. And
Yeah.
this CSR part, that is actually about the ethics. It's about an ethical part of responsibility. It's nowadays the social part of the sustainability terminology. So if we talk about, I don't know if you have heard about Elkington, but he talked about the triple bottom line. It's about the three dimensions of sustainability, and one of the dimensions is social sustainability, and a part of this is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So everything comes together like that. But it has not always been like this. Things usually emerge over time or merge together over time.
Absolutely. And I also imagine that we didn't have so many rules and regulation. This was not regulated. So what, employers have done in the past, they were just looking for the well-being of their employees and maybe
Not even the
mostly
well-being. I think it's about productive.
that's what I wanted to add. It was more like if it's more productive, let's have our employees be
Yeah,
happy, right?
yeah. So 200 years ago, they did it because they were supposed to do it, because or else the employees and the unions will like go into strikes, and and it will be difficult for them to lead them. So they wanted employees to be productive, and that's why they offer education and healthcare and different things. But nowadays, since the 70s, where we had the big legislation on discrimination, we have seen changes, changes in terminology and in how important it has become, not only for companies, but for the whole society, to have diversity and inclusion.
I think you touch
Yes,
on.
yes.
Yep,
Do you
you
hear me now?
touched on.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I think that during the 70s, we had the big legislation, but I think that legislation is one thing, to have it written, and then to actually walk the talk is another thing. And that's where we are right now. And those are the challenges that we have to actually implement legislation
Yeah,
to take action.
absolutely. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's interesting. What challenges can you see that leaders face today in implementing sustainability and social sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion in their businesses?
I think that we have a lot of challenges. One of them is that you you need to be able to understand and see what you have, and you cannot make changes before you know the conditions that you are in, as an employer or in a company. So for me, it's really, really important to do a lot of due diligence, meaning on companies, and to analyze everything from sustainability report, policies, and so on. But it's not enough. You need, as I mentioned, you need to walk the talk, and everybody nowadays wants to portray themselves as being the most sustainable, like it's a competition, oh, we're the most diverse and we're the most sustainable. But a big challenge is actually to showcase what you have done and show what you're doing. And a big part of this, I think, it's taking out the metrics, seeing how many women works in the company and in the board of directors. But I think that gender equality is one thing. I talk a lot about ethnic and cultural diversity and inclusion and equity, because I think that that's maybe the biggest problem in Sweden at the moment. And it may be that I also focus more on those topics because I'm an immigrant woman. The intersectional part of it is really important also, when you have you're both a woman and then also an underrepresented ethnic minority. But I think that the biggest challenge is to actually attract diverse teams, to lead diverse teams, but mostly to recruit diversity. Before you can lead, you need to recruit. You need to have the representation.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to drop in something that I recently read on a post on LinkedIn. I engaged a little bit with that post, and someone was sharing that there is a statistic showing that Sweden doesn't have a challenge in attracting international talent, but it has a challenge in retaining international talent, because statistically, people like me in EU leave the country after around 2 years or 22 months. So the reason, there is something behind that, right? So
Yeah.
when we say we have a problem with managing, the diverse teams, then Sweden as a country, it seems like we're really good at attracting international talent. But do you have any hints there? What would be then that have these people not stay and maybe go back?
Yeah, I actually don't even think that we're good at attracting international talents. That's the first thing, because it depends on to which position. Yes, of course, we will be able to attract cleaners and people like bartenders and so on, but in higher positions where you actually can make a difference, because a lot of companies where I've worked or who I talk to often say, yeah, this is a business opportunity to attract international talent. But the business opportunity comes when you have that talent being able to influence the business. And if you just attract a cleaner, that person will not be on a strategic operational level, a C level, and take I don't know, decisions on the strategic business strategy of the company or the future of the company. So you also need to understand that just by attracting international talents doesn't mean that you will have that effect you want. It's important to attract the talents, but also to be able to have talents on all positions in the company, especially those positions that are strategic for the company. Then you will have an effect on diversity, and you will see the effect of diversity. But to your question, because that's one point. But then when we talk about how inclusive the companies are, I can only share with you my personal experience. Of course, I worked as an anti-discrimination lawyer or discrimination lawyer with discrimination cases, so I've heard a lot. And of course, I also have my glasses on, so it's not the complete truth. So I'm often open with that. But my experience is that it's once you're in the company, it's very easy just to show the metrics, of course, that we have such as so many immigrants or women or whatever. But it's really difficult also to make a career within the company. I recall one of my first works where I was underpaid, like by 10,000 crowns, in contrary to my colleagues that were like had higher payments, and I had higher education. So I could see that because I always call Skatteverket, the tax authority in Sweden, to control.
Yeah.
That's one very important tip to all my friends out there. If you want to know what other people make, you just call, or you can actually buy Learn a Call also to look at the salaries. And it showed me that my colleagues actually, they were doing the same jobs and they were paid 10,000 crowns more. And I had like higher education than them. And I don't think that they plan to discriminate me, but I think that indirectly they did by paying me less, and they assumed they could pay me less because I was so grateful for my first job. It
Sure.
was really difficult to come in. So I think that, to go back to your question, I think that companies have a difficult time retaining international talents because there is a lot of discrimination within the company as well. Discrimination regarding opportunities to make a career path, regarding salary, regarding education, and so on. So I think that a lot of international talents just get tired. And then you have the culture. Often in Sweden, we talk about having an inclusive culture, but it's really difficult if you come from another country to relate to Swedes in the beginning. And I'm saying this with in all honesty, because I've lived here since I was 7. So I feel like a Swede. Other times I feel like a Latina. But it could also be really hard to interact with Swedes in the workplace.
Yeah, and you mentioned
That's
to
my
me.
experience. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case for other international talents, but that's my experience.
Oh, absolutely, and I think you're actually hitting something there, because when you share about, okay, like we are good at attracting talent, but are we really, attracting highly qualified talent that takes, leadership positions, or are we only, attracting talent? And if I'm looking at, my experience, I joined a lower position when I moved to Sweden, and I in the same industry from two, multinational companies, and I was holding a higher position where where I was working in Romania, and I took here a lower position just because it was not common for me to come out to really a project leader or team leader. So I had to start at the bottom, and I had to accept a lower position just because I don't think, again, it was meant to discriminate or put me in a box or anything like that. It's just because sometimes there is an unconscious bias that we want people to go through the same journey that we went through to get the position. So when you or I kind of land into a team, right, and we have a team manager that has worked for that position for 20 years or 10 years, they would expect for us to stay in the company 10 years to be able to have one of those positions. And as you just mentioned, that's sometimes is too long. Many
Yeah,
times.
but I understand your point, but I actually don't see it that way either, because first of all, most of the people here, we had a big refugee. A lot of people coming from from the Middle East or other Arabic countries in 2015. We have had like big groups of people coming from Latin America in the 70s and 80s and so on. But we also, it's important to understand that we also have a lot of children that are born here or that came here as I did when I was 7. I haven't seen anything else than Swedish educational school. Or, I went to low school, middle school, high school, university in Sweden. My son is born here, but still he faces discrimination. So I don't think that that's the whole explanation, that is unconscious bias because they want you to take the same road as they did. Because in my experience, I'm only sharing my experience, and I've been working for 16 years in a bunch of different industries, everything from financing to digitalization to public authorities to legal bureaus and agencies, to you name it. I've been there. Healthcare, I've done everything almost. And often you see that some people make like really, really fast career paths. They don't work 10 or 20 years to have that position. And this is the same in all over the world. You like meritocracy. So you're a friend with a friend that presents you, or you just employ somebody that looks like you and think like you, because you don't want to take chances. You don't want to assimilate that people can think another way, or do other things. And you especially in Sweden, where we don't like conflicts, we want people to think the same. We want consensus. It's really important. I love consensus. I'm Swede in that way, but we want consensus. So we recruit people looking like us. It's not only about you having to come in on a lower position because you need to work as hard as they did. Because we have a lot of people born here that are facing the same discrimination as you or me or anybody else. We have children of the immigrants that were born here, and just the way they look, they're discriminating by the way they look or their last name, or so I think it's a bunch of different things that you can apply to this, and why we're not, I say, I don't like we and them, but why immigrants are not represented in the workplace as they should be. In Stockholm, we have 35% immigrants. So
yeah. So now, if someone is watching and they're a leader and decision maker in a company, and they say, okay, so maybe there is an opportunity for me there to do something different. So what would you say are the opportunities for leaders that see the problem and want to do something about it?
You mentioned something there. See the problem. You need to see the problems, but also see the opportunities. I think it's more important. It's important to understand that Sweden, it's a small country in the world. I think we're 11 million right now at the moment. Actually, we're turning to 12, something like that. But in the big context, we're a very small nation, and we are dependent on other countries for exports, for businesses, and so on. So it's really important to see that the international talents could help your company with exploitation, help your company with new ways of looking at things, with innovation. We all know that there's a lot of research done in this field that diversity is the key, it's the core of innovation. You need to have different people looking at the problem from the different angles to be able to have the best solutions. So I think that there is a big opportunities in recruiting talents, but also right now, when we have a lot of difficulties in the recruitment, we don't have especially in IT digitalization, you don't need to speak fluent Swedish to be able to work. You don't need. But that's not even a problem either, because as I mentioned before, a lot of us has lived here for forever. So, but I think that employers are missing out in Sweden, are missing out on Florins or Scarletts, that are out there knocking doors and trying to come in, and we're well educated and we have the driving force. And I actually read once that the best question on interview, I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but one of the best questions was like, tell me who your parents were and where did they come from? Because my parents, they didn't go to school, to university. They're workers, blue collar workers, and my mother cleaned. She's a nurse right now, and my father, he cleaned also, worked at the forest in Sweden, and that shows more about a person and their path than anything else, because I had a really hard time growing up, with poor parents. I was really, really poor in Chile also. So, and now I'm a lawyer, I have 3 degrees and so on. I work in a bunch of industry. For me, that tells you more about a person's driving force than anything else. Absolutely. So I wish that we would see that, as something positive, coming out from poverty to making this career path. Wow, what an inspiration. It's not about me. I'm trying to stay humble here, but it's about showing people that and showcase also immigrants and their driving force. It's not easy to come from another country to learn the language and to educate yourself and to take a position in a Swedish company. And that says a lot about the person and their strength and courage also.
I absolutely agree with you 100% because I know it's the very small percentage of people leaving their countries like you did and your family and myself and my wife. We are actually among, again, sounds like bragging, but we are among the best, right? Because so many others of my colleagues, they are just complacent with, accepting the conditions that they have there. And when someone, does all the trouble to come to your country, right? I mean, they already, overcome more than the majority of people, right, in Sweden. People that I often share, like, if you are, in a privileged, nationality, and you are in a country where you're privileged, and you travel to Romania, for example, or you travel to Chile, you're gonna be seen like, one of those wanted type of tourists. People want you to come there, right? And we are quite the opposite. We are not the kind of, tourists that we should, we are maybe wanted in Sweden, not by the majority. I know the people and the leaders in business understand they need international talent, but we're not dealing day to day with them. Day to day, we're dealing with the majority of people, with where the majority is.
And I would say also to leaders to be courageous and take the chance and just employ. Sometimes we make it so damn difficult, to just recruit persons, and to give them the chance. And I actually don't know why, because often I feel like when you recruit an international talent or an immigrant or whatever you want to call an ethnic minority, you always want to like test them before, so you don't have to take the risk. But when you employ a Swede or a Swedish people, Swede, you always look at what they can bring to the table, like opportunities forward, you take a chance on them and so on. And I would hope that we would have a more courageous leaders that would take that, like have a leap of faith and just take the chance, because it's not even a chance. As I told you, most of my friends and colleagues and so on that I've talked to, there are immigrants. They're like, oh my God, they are so energetic, so well educated, so smart, positive, have like a driving force like nobody else. So for me, it's not even a risk. So I would say don't see immigrants in the workplace as a risk. See them as an opportunity to just grow your business.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you on the recruitment, because I often say, and it's probably going to be a subject for one of my shows, is I say that when you're not able to really look at the person and their potential, what we're doing, you're like hiding between, or actually behind, degrees and experience. So when you require someone to have a number of years of experience, or you require them to have a degree, what you're doing, you're saying about yourself as a recruiter that you don't know how to spot a great talent, and you're giving this responsibility to either the university who had tested the person and give the person a degree or a diploma, or either to previous employers who has tested and took the chance with the person. So whenever someone doesn't take a chance with a great talent, they're missing out. But they're afraid of making a mistake, because they don't know how to recruit. They don't know how to see a Scarlett in the
I think they're also a
multi-diversity.
little bit afraid, because it's not, as we have talked before, it's not always easy that to lead diversity, and especially people from other cultures. So I think that it could be, a lot of managers could also be afraid of leading other ethnicities, because they don't understand how to communicate, and of course there are differences, but they're not so big, that we can't overcome them. And I always say fail forward. It's important to be able to fail and to do wrong things and just to go forward. That's the way we're moving and evolving as human
Absolutely.
beings.
So you already touched on what managers could do. So if you share one or two more things, like what they can do, like if someone wants to be on top of the diversity and sustainability in today's world and in the future of work, what they can do. Well, what are some things that they can do?
I think that, as I mentioned before, I think that some things that they could do is stop writing a lot of policies and roadmaps and start just doing. I think that you need to be able to also to involve the need owners. In Swedish, behovsägare, and the need owners are the people you're recruiting, to understand their point of view. So points of view are really important. And I usually work a lot with design thinking. I don't know if you know that concept. Is a method where you empathize with the people, where you empathize with the need owners. It's a concept that I actually work a lot with HR departments. I did this with Svenska Spel to figure out what is the real problem. That's the most important thing to do. Not figure out solutions to what you think is the problem. Figure out what is the problem. Is the problem actually the language barriers or education, or is the problem that we are not meritocratic when we recruit, or that we're recruiting on nepotism? You see a lot of nepotism in Swedish companies. That's the son of the daughter of the. So I think that it's really important, and also to have inclusive culture, so you will maintain the international talents that you have recruited.
Wow, thank you so much. I know we are over time, but I have a more personal question for you. So tell me, I'm curious about what was the best leadership advice you have ever received? Whom was from, and how did that help you?
I have received a lot of leadership advices during my. I'm actually a very hard-headed leader at sometimes. It's difficult, because I think also that I'm evolving as a leader. I've not always been that, like, a good leader, and I think I recall two times when I got very good advice. The first one is from my professor at university, at Karlstad University. We often had mock arbitrations. I don't know if you know what that is, but
No.
it's like fictive negotiations, fictive courts. And
Yeah.
I always won the case, always, but I always received the lowest grade. So I went to my professor and I said, but I won the case, but you still gave me like the lowest grade. Why? And he said, yeah, but it's not about winning. It's about not making the other part feel like a loser.
Wow.
Often I hear that people say, yeah, both have to be winners. No, but he said it's about not making the other person feel like a loser, or the other party feel like a loser. So it's about consensus, but also uh, going out that door and both not feeling like a loser. So I always take that with me also in my leadership. Even though I want to be right and want to have right, I don't want to make the other person feel like losers. So it's about consensus and actually talking through things, especially when you're negotiating. And the other leadership advice that I've got, and I've gotten this from a bunch of managers that I've had, is that I need to be better in delegating, to my colleagues and to my team, because I have been head of different departments, and I must admit that I have been very, very bad at delegating at times, and I tend to do everything myself, and I'm so fast, and I've just run before everybody else. It's not because I don't like to micromanage people, but I know a lot about a lot of things. So it's so easy for me to do
Yeah.
it myself, So that's why it's so good for me now to be an independent consultant.
Where you just tell people what needs to be done, right?
Yeah, because I just do what needs to be done, and I just run. But I think that's a really good leadership advice that I've gotten from a lot of different managers. And from my mentor also. I have a mentor. This is really important to say, because I think that mentorship is the key to everything. I have a Swedish mentor, and I always talk to him about, regarding problems with the sustainability, diversity, and working places and that I've been in, and so on. But he always tells me the same thing: you need to delegate some more. You can't
Wow.
manage everything yourself.
That's so true, and I think it's to some extent valid for all of us. You're not alone in that, and we
I admit
probably.
it. I admit that I'm like the worst person in delegating.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely having you, and I love our conversation. The last question we usually ask all of our guests is, what does leadership today means for you? If you just summarize one sentence or one word, what would that be?
For me, leadership is the ability to motivate and develop diverse teams
Right on.
to a common goal or a common purpose.
I cannot say anything else. It's perfect, spot on. Thank you so much, Scarlett. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me. Hope to see you soon and keep up the good work that you're doing.
Absolutely. You too. And I look forward to catch up. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.